Thought we were waiting, apologize.
That's okay.
Good morning. Today is Saturday, March 18th, 2023. And this is a special meeting of the Kings County Board of Supervisors. Each vote today will be a verbal vote so the members of the public can hear how each member has voted. After we have had a motion and a second regarding each item we are taking up today, there will be a roll call vote by district. Joe Nevs.
Here.
Richard Valley.
Here.
Doug Verboon.
Here.
Rusty Robinson.
Here.
Richard Fagundes.
Here. Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have 5 present. Quorum. We can conduct the business of the county. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Steve Verboon, will you mind leading us?
Please follow me in our pledge of allegiance. Ready? Salute. Of the United States. To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Thank you. So here we are. This is our 3rd day back for a special meeting of the Board of Supervisors. And just like for the last 2 days before we hold the meeting, we're going to go with County Council, and the board has to find enough cause to hold this meeting legally, right? Because of the short notice. So Council, why don't you lead us through that?
The Board of Supervisors has convened pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.5, which authorizes the board to hold a special meeting without complying with the normal 24-hour notice and posting requirements when a majority of its members find an emergency exists that severely impairs the public health and involves matters upon which prompt action is necessary due to the disruption or threatened disruption of public services and facilities. In order to strictly comply with the statutory requirements, I'm asking at the commencement of this meeting, the board consider making findings that 1, there is an emergency in Kings County due to floods that severely impacts the public health and safety, and 2, that the emergency involves matters upon which prompt action is necessary due to the disruption of or threatened disruption of public services.
Okay. And then just for full transparency, for everyone in the chambers, anyone who may be listening online. So the last 2 days, the Board of Supervisors, again, we've been here. We've been getting information from a lot of people who are in the room, as there are a lot of people in the room here today. Information and presentations, not only in public, but also in closed session. And that information led us, the board, to make a decision yesterday that, as we were being told, the biggest threat in Kings County is to the city of Corcoran and the residents that live there. And we believe from the information that from public and closed session, we made the best decision in the interest of Corcoran and obviously to save the city of Corcoran. That being said, the board voted to direct our public works director to notify Boswell that there was a need to, in regard to take action to levy 749. And that, and so there was a time associated with that as far as how many hours they had to do that. I'm trying to speak in very general terms here, but also be transparent. Okay, so Boswell received that news. They then asked for all 5 board members, which we know we can't meet as a group. So Sue Verboon and I went to Corcoran and met with some associates of Boswell Company. They're here this morning. Sue Nevs and met with them after. So coming out of that, the board has agreed to at least be here for this time period right now to find finding and to, based on Boswell's request, have an opportunity to present information to the full board publicly. That's why we're here in an attempt to hold a special meeting. So that being said, any comments from the board as it relates to the findings to hold this meeting? Superman?
I have one. So we have a lot of new people that don't come to our board meetings today. And one of the concerns was the fact that we don't interact with them when they come speak at the podium. This is an opportunity for you to say whatever you want to say to us, well, without us interacting with us. We don't want to have an argument. We just need to hear your information and how the flood are going to affect you and your family or your business. And, we're not going to interact with you. We'll take the information, take it to the back room and discuss it. This is a good opportunity for everybody to share what they have to share. And, this time Boswell's here today to share their side of it. And we have everybody else to share their side of it as well. We don't need an argument. We just need to have the facts. We'll have to go in there and make the big decisions to do what's best for the community. So thank you.
Yes.
For being here too.
Yeah, and I think, if I'm correct, on top of that, the board already made a decision. Any decision today would be whether to hold to that decision or to reverse that decision, correct? Council?
I can't predict what the board is going to make, what
That's
decisions the
the
board will make.
general question of the day, right? Because, okay, Mr. Hill, you're shaking your head. Go ahead.
I think what Ms. Freeman is trying to articulate it during closed session, you can take other actions than just that one action today.
Okay, true. Okay. The foundation, though, the reason for even being here, though, is in regards to a decision the board made yesterday. So anybody else have anything to add on finding?
No, I think the findings are clear and I move for, go ahead and move forward.
Motion by Nevs, second by Verboen. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Joe Nevs,
Yes.
Richard Valley,
Aye.
Doug Verboen,
Yes.
Rusty Robinson,
Yes.
Richard Fagundes.
Okay, thank you. So that takes us to unscheduled appearances. Typically, there's a 2-minute time limit to unscheduled appearances. But just like we've done for the last 2 days during the special meetings, we're going to waive that. It doesn't mean you get an hour at the podium, but this is an emergency. And it's a very critical time for everybody. And we want to make sure everyone has enough time. Let's continue the conversation. Let's have the dialogue. Feel free to approach the podium at any time and to give the information that you want. And council, as I advised you earlier, we're going to need a lot more leeway because this unscheduled appearance time is going to be a lot different than we typically have.
If I understand, you're probably referring to leeway for allowing time for public comment and those things. And
Might be questions from the board or people at the podium.
given the emergency situation and the need to receive information, if the board wants clarification of public comment, I would avoid any discussion that could be considered deliberations.
Okay. Then at this time, before we go to comment cards, I'm just going to go ahead and ask that if any of the reps from Boswell would like to approach the podium and present information. Yes, sir. Just state your name at the podium for the record. Thank you, sir, and good morning.
We're calling a special meeting.
Mhm.
As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, and again, my name is Dominic Sweeney. I am a water engineer for the Boswell Company, in Corcoran, California. A little background about myself. Bobby Desert. Licensed civil engineer in California. And most of my expertise in topography and water. A lot of our focus year after year is we're to see a catastrophic flooding event. How would we? Okay. So this first chart that I'm presenting is from California mitigation. See that? This is the precipitation chart for the slurry-based precipitation index. And this chart goes back to the 1900s on 12 degrees. Low to mid elevation. And what we're trying to show in this chart, and this is probably available throughout the year, tracking very closely at a very early date with some of the wettest year, which this chart makes it to the 90 years. And you can kind of see this in kind of 2 weeks, a significant boost. That's fine. Okay. Okay, so in the last 2 weeks, there's been a very significant climb in the total accumulated precipitation. And that's, as everybody knows, due to these atmospheric river events that have been coming into the state and delivering kind of like unprecedented amounts of precip in a very short amount of time. So again, this is kind of where we are today. We're at 45.2 inches. We're only about 10 inches away from breaking the all-time record for wettest year in the history. And there's another 4 to 5 inches forecasted over the next 5 to 6 days. So we think that the chances are that we're going to continue to not only track but exceed some of these wetter years where we've seen a lot of water enter the county and create flooding and damage. This next chart is from the same website. This is the snow water content for each of the mountain ranges in the Sierra. You have the northern and at the top of the screen, the central Sierra in the center, and the southern Sierra at the south or at the bottom of the screen. The Kings River through the Kern River represent the southern Sierra. And you can see on this chart that the southern Sierra has been well above the other portions of the state in terms of snowpack accumulation. We're currently at 263% of the April 1 historic peak snowpack. So we have almost a 3x snowpack on what we would expect to see as an average year. So again, kind of unprecedented snowpack conditions. We are already well above the 1983 kind of snow pillow trace that's on the screen here. And 1969 isn't plotted on this chart, but we're essentially at par with the 1969 flood year. And again, with this future precip that's forecasted, we think we're going to be up in the 280% or more range as far as snowpack accumulation. Again, which I think as far as the records show, this would be the biggest year that we've seen going back maybe 100 years, at least as far as stuff that we've been able to measure. And again, as some context, in the 69 and 83 flood years, the Tulare Lake area impounded about 1 million acre feet of floodwater. And that's a number that we've been thinking about a lot lately, is if this were to happen again, and maybe it's a little bit worse, what types of volumes do we need to consider storing in our area? And go on to the next slide here. These next charts are for each of the reservoir systems in the Southern Sierra. So the Kings, the Kuya, Tule, and the Kern. And this is from the California Nevada River Forecast Center. They do April through July and water year runoff forecasts throughout the state and throughout Nevada as well. This first chart is for the Kings River at Pine Flat Dam. You can see that early in the year, this kind of darker purple kind of line, that would be their kind of what they would expect to happen if average conditions were to persist beyond that point. And you can see that early in the year, things were fairly normal, if not maybe dry. And as we progressed into December, as folks may remember, there was a significant amount of rain and snow that came into the state through an atmospheric river event, one of the first of the season. And per this chart, there was a significant gain in the predicted runoff for the season. And as January kind of started to peter out, about mid-January, these forecasts started to decrease due to the lack of snow and rain accumulation, which is pretty common for these forecasts. And, that type of condition lasted all the way through about, we'll call it, mid to late February with dry conditions. Runoff forecasts were going down. But it wasn't until this kind of late February when we had, 3 inches of rain in Hanford, Corcoran, which, some data that I saw said that was the single largest 24-hour event going back to the late 1800s. So again, some pretty crazy stuff, pretty unprecedented type of accumulations. And that was just kind of the beginning of this kind of recent run up on the precip and the snowpack. And you can see now that it's been just basically on an uphill pull into some of these just record levels. So The forecasted percent of average for the Kings right now is 257% of average runoff for the April through July period. The total amount of volume that equals per this information is about 3.1 million acre feet. It's slated to run off just from the April through July period. More will run off before and after that date, but that's what's slated to come just in the AJ period.
Okay, I apologize for interrupting, but would it be possible for you to switch your view to presenter view instead of the slide view so it's easier for everyone to see?
This is just a PDF. It's
Oh,
not,
okay.
it's not in PowerPoint.
Can it go full screen?
Yeah, let me see if I can do that. That should be better.
Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thanks. So that's on the Kings River, and you're going to see the same situation for the rest of the watersheds. This is the Kaweah River at Terminus Dam. Same trends, same positioning. It's a little higher percent of average. This one's almost 300% of average in the AJ period, about 800,000 acre feet. I failed to mention on the Kings River, the reservoir's just shy of 800,000 acre feet in storage. That's about 80% of their full capacity. They're actually the best positioned in terms of all the Southern Sierra watersheds and reservoirs. As everybody knows, Lake Success and Lake Kaweah have been spilling over the spillway and causing damaging releases. So the Kings isn't there yet, but we feel that this is at our doorstep, and we're going to see some pretty big flows in the South Fork and maybe the Crescent Bypass. And that's going to head, towards the lake bottom areas and potentially cause some issues around the city of Lemoore and surrounding areas. But we'll continue to go through this. The Tule River at Success Dam is at 385%. It's almost 400% of the average for the AJ period. Another 227,000 acre feet is forecasted to run off from this reservoir. And again, that's almost 3 times the reservoir capacity, and that reservoir is already full and spilling. So pretty amazing kind of water conditions. They're actually pretty troubling, but this is kind of what we're seeing right now. And lastly, the Kern River, this one's at 322% of average on the forecasted AJ runoff. And the runoff forecast is about 1.4 million acre feet. And there was just another survey performed where they can figure out the entire volume of the snowpack through LiDAR surveys with airplanes. And they actually found that there was 2.2 million acre feet, not 1.4. It's sitting actually up in the mountains right now. So we feel that there's additional risks with the Kern River hitting our area maybe later in the season as the snowpack begins to melt off. So again, we're seeing that we're going to get hit from all sides, all corners, and not one of the systems appears to be less than pretty much near record conditions for this date. And this is a graphic from the Airborne Snow Observatory program, the ones that do the LiDAR surveys in the mountains. This graphic is it's trying to show the amount of unripe snow, which means that it's not susceptible to melting off fairly quickly. So a way to think about this is if the snow is unripe, it means it's really cold. It's not ready to basically release down the mountain and run off. Just about 2 weeks ago, right, kind of late February, early March timeframe, this same report was done, and nearly 100% of the snowpack was unripe. So it was very cold, needed a lot of energy to melt. With these warm rain on snow events, you can see how much that's dramatically changed the situation. Now only about 2/3 of the snowpack is unripe for melting. So we have about 1/3 of the entire volume, called 1 million acre feet, is ready to come off the mountain. So that's why we think the Kings River and these other watersheds are on the precipice of additional, increased runoff conditions that we haven't seen in quite a long time. So I wanted to show that chart. Next, this is the 6-day precipitation forecast from the River Forecast Center. And to note, these forecasts have actually been pretty close as the year has progressed. So we have a fair amount of confidence, like I said, that another, call it 3 to 5 inches in certain locations in the watersheds is expected over the next 6 days. And this is going to create additional volumes in the reservoirs that are already full. And we expect, damaging flows to persist from the Tule and Kaweah systems with the Kings River following closely behind it, most likely. Next, I wanted to show just kind of what actions have already been taken in the Corcoran area in the Tulare Lake bed vicinities by the J.G. Boswell Company. So these two highlighted areas with a blue fill and a red outline, that would be J.G. Boswell Company farmland that was prepped to plant and to be put to good use. We preemptively decided to cut our first levee right between the cross creeks at the Tule River Canal. And we felt that that was the first step that we needed to take to relieve pressure in the system. It's one of the lower levees in the area. And we decided that was the first step that we needed to take to relieve pressure in the water system. This blue area represents the amount of water coverage within that cell to this date. And the next action that we took just a day later was to cut the El Rico levee just near the El Rico, the old El Rico airport. And as of this morning, that was the extent of the flooded lands. This accounts for over 20,000 acre feet of water volume that we've already taken to relieve pressure in the system and to try to deal with these flows from an early date. So we've been at this for over a week, and we've been, like everybody else, scrambling to evacuate equipment, facilities, different things that might be in these locations that were not anticipated a flood, before about a week ago. So wanted to show that to the board.
Do you mind, just with your, if you can go back to that screen, do you mind just with your mouse, just point out the location of levee 749?
Yeah, sure. So the Reclamation District 749 boundary is along the Tule River Canal, running east-west in this location. And the 749 district runs to the north at this corner at the Tulare Lake Canal, and it runs due northwest along this region. So it's a pretty extensive area, and the principal levee for the Reclamation District is at this kind of southern southeastern border near the El Rico and what we call the pocket, which is our kind of water body that we use to track flows in the area.
Okay. Is it fair to say that in that general location, that's the lowest point, the bottom of the lake?
The bottom of the lake or the levee?
Is that the lowest point where people typically refer to that as the bottom of the lake?
It is not.
It's not? Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you.
If I may interrupt this for just a moment, it appears that discussion is indeed going to be necessary, more than just receiving information as allowed by public comment. There is provision in the Brown Act that allows for an agenda item to be added to the agenda when there are conditions of emergency. And I'm proposing to do that at this time formally so that the board can freely and without concern engage in discussions here, reminding that there will be deliberations afterwards in closed session about an actual course of action to take, but so that you don't have to feel constrained.
I don't see anything that's different so far from the last 2 days, but if it's making you nervous, council, and that's what you want to advise, we can bring it to the board.
Yes.
Move was outlined by chair.
Second.
Motion by Neves and second by Verboen.
Joe Nevs,
Yes.
Richard Valley.
Aye.
Doug Verboen.
Yes.
Rusty Robinson. Richard Fagundes.
Yes.
Can you help me understand what the motion was?
You're the one that stated it.
Oh, to move forward? Okay, thank you very much.
Your language.
Okay, so does
Okay,
that
we
mean,
have that.
so,
right.
Yeah.
so does that mean, I don't want to close unscheduled.
No.
No,
But
it's
we'll
just an agenda
continue,
item now.
and this will be now an agenda item. Yeah, so we're,
Add to the agenda and it's,
Discuss it as a board at this point.
Okay.
the
got it.
requirement is a 3/5 vote of the board and an emergency condition or disaster, which we have both of those. So based upon that and the vote of the board, we can move forward as a regularly scheduled agenda item now.
I appreciate you doing that. I want everyone to be comfortable. Like I said, I want
Correct.
people who are here today to feel comfortable to speak. Continue, sir.
Okay, thank you. So again, I want to point out that if we hadn't taken action to flood our own protected farmland and to, without anybody else's direction or input, we decided to do this. And had we not, we believe that the water level system or the water level for our system would have continued to rise. And it may have overtopped lower levees in the area that are generally west of Highway 43 and east of 10th Avenue. So we feel that we kind of bought some time maybe for those lower lying levees that otherwise would have been overtopped had we not taken preemptive action on our own part. So wanted to point that out to the board. And yeah, and Mark Unruh reminded me that throughout this entire process, we've been pumping water to the south where we have reservoirs where we can impound floodwater. So we've been spending a lot of time and effort and thought process to try to deal with these flows as best we can. This is the last thing we want to do. We don't want to flood farmland. We don't want to cut levees. But as you've seen, sometimes actions are taken to relieve that system pressure. And we've been doing both that and pumping water to the best of our ability to prevent flooding from occurring. And again, just to reiterate, we think that the year type that we're looking at is a 1969 or a 1983 or worse. Those were about 1 million acre foot years in the lake bed area. In the 1983 flood year, the Bryant-Kern Canal, Delta Lands Reclamation District 770, which is a reclamation district in this area, they own pump stations on the Bryant-Kern Canal, and they're able to pump floodwater out of these river systems into the Bryant-Kern to dispose of water upstream before it even comes to the county. Unfortunately, due to subsidence in the Bryant-Kern Canal between basically Wood Lake and Porterville and Deer Creek, there's no capacity to convey additional flows that those pump stations used to be able to dispose of. So those are additional things that we're thinking about this year that, hey, if there's another 250,000 acre feet that we were able to pump in prior years upstream, and that's not available to us this year, we may need to stack another 250,000 acre feet on top of these historical massive flood events. So those are the types of things we've been thinking about and considering as we've been going through with our plans and with our planning for the flood. This next set of numbers and table here is something that we've been working on for a long time. Every year we conduct surveys on the levees, on the ground, and we try to figure out if we were to see an event like this, where's the water going to go? What's the type of volume we could hold? And just so everybody knows, we're never wanting to flood a big area that's unnecessarily needing to be flooded. The way you fight floods is you try to find the most efficient way to store floodwater, which means you're trying to find the least amount of acres that could be impacted, at least on an initial basis. And that's what you've seen in our areas that we flooded so far, is we've picked the smaller compartments that are in the low-lying areas as the first line of defense against floodwaters. And we're just very early in the process. We're about a week in, so we expect that additional areas will take on floodwater in the coming days and weeks. But to go back to this, all the low-lying areas that are likely to flood that are not within the Corcoran levee, let me back up. This is saying if the Corcoran city does not flood and everything around it is available for flood storage, this is the amount of volume and the amount of acres that could potentially see floodwater. And what I'm trying to show in this figure is when you go down this list to the very kind of bottom edge, we're looking at the water volume and the water surface elevation. It would, excuse me one second. We're looking at the elevation and the associated volume that would would take. And what you're seeing is if we need to get to, we'll call it 1,000,000 acre feet in the lake bed area, that's associated with elevation 186 with the NAV 88 datum. The Corcoran levee that protects Corcoran is currently at elevation 188. So per these numbers, if this were to play out, there'd only be about 2 feet of freeboard on the Corcoran levee if we needed to store 1,000,000 acre feet in the lake bed area. What I'm also trying to show on the left is this area that traditionally hasn't seen floodwater in the past. We say that this is kind of the area southeast of the lake bed vicinities. And this shows the associated volume of that area with the acreage and the water surface elevation for that particular area. And what we're trying to show is if you need to get to elevation 186 to store 1,000,000 acre feet, this is including that portion of the lake bed area. At 186, that's about 200,000 acre feet, we'll call it, just kind of easy numbers. If you were to take out 200,000 acre feet out of the entire cumulative total of the entire area, you're essentially adding about 2 feet of water surface elevation in the other areas. And how I'm getting to that is you'll see on the far right that we're going up by 100,000 acre feet every foot on this table to the right. So what I'm saying is if you take out 200,000 acre feet out of that total, that's basically equivalent to 2 additional feet of water height that the rest of the areas would have to get to. And the reason why we're bringing this up is we think that if that area isn't a part of the flood operation this year, that we're putting additional pressure and risk on the Corcoran levee that could put the city of Corcoran at additional risk, which is something that we don't think would be wise in a year that's this big and unprecedented. And we're going to get to some additional information, but I wanted to share that that's the kind of numbers that we're seeing in the area.
Dominic, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I've always thought that we had 120,000 acres in the lake bottom, not 100,000.
What's that?
I thought we always had 120,000 acres in the lake bottom, not 100,000.
So if you include the high areas, the low areas, everything together that we'll call as the historic Tulare Lake, which by the way used to be much larger than that, but this is just including the areas that are more the low-lying areas that would be the highest at risk to flooding at these elevations.
188 feet and lower?
What's that?
Is that 188 feet and lower?
It's kind of, it's in that range. So if existing levees are way above 188, those probably aren't at risk of flooding and aren't considered as the maybe traditional lake bed area. So this is everything that we think would be at the elevation 188 would be flooded.
Okay.
So let me go to the next one here. So this is the last figure I have to present. This is a topography map that we collected for the area. Let me see. So this is a collection of topography information, ground shots, levee shots, to try to figure out, what does the lake bed look like today? Where do we think water is most likely to accumulate at certain elevations? And this also looks at the various levees and levee compartments within the area and kind of what their elevations look like as well. As you can see, people think that this 749 area is the low area. And while it is an area that is, we'll say, low relative to everything else, what we're finding is that there's this kind of new low finger that stretches out in this area to the southeast that's basically within a foot of the historic low point out in the lake, which is kind of in this respective area. And also what you'll see is the lowest levees are actually kind of in this area east of 10th Avenue, kind of at this intersection of everything right here. So this is the information that we put together to try to figure this stuff out. And obviously it's changed a lot in 20, 30 years with subsidence and with the ground changing and various levee improvements and different things like that. But this is what we feel like, if everything were to fill up to a certain elevation, these are where the contours would land. and the areas that would potentially be inundated by floodwater. And just to remind everybody, this area, this kind of low area is already filled with water. We've already filled this one up, and that's kind of the current state of the operation. And the Corcoran levee, just to remind folks that don't know, it extends from this junction, not quite junction, but this area where the cross creeks kind of come together. And it runs all the way to the south to this corner and extends to the east and southeast. It goes around the prison and extends to the north along County Line Road and starts to dive back around this area. So that's our biggest concern, is the Corcoran levee in the city of Corcoran. The floodwaters that are coming from the east are coming from this direction, from the Kaweah and Tule rivers. And as you'll find, there's some pretty low levees in this area here. And the way that water flows is from high to low energy. And we're finding that the water surface elevation near county line is actually higher than it is further to the west where we're taking in water. And if a levee was cut, say, to the east, I mean, this is just the hydraulics, but this would most likely relieve pressure in the system upstream of Corcoran, or instead of conveying water all the way to the west out into these other areas, you could potentially reduce the water level by having water being diverted kind of upstream of the Corcoran area. And it's already kind of happening by running out of the canals, but just want to remind people that water's flowing from high to low. So
Can you keep that zoomed up, please? I have a question.
Yeah, I have a question here too also. So you have El Rico full, and then you have the one that goes up from Cross Creek down. You got that one full. And you want to propose now, you want to fill the southeast lake bed next?
well, that isn't our property, but what we're saying is we've made preemptive cuts in the lower levees in our property. And we feel that the southeast area is the next lowest area in the vicinity of the high flows, that if this area doesn't have water, we think that that's going to put an additional 2 to 3 feet of water elevation on the Corcoran levee long-term at the end of the flood fight. So
So we base our decision, it's on. We have more residential area than that side than versus the 749, correct?
I want to jump in here real quick. Thank you again for allowing us to present this information this morning. A little bit of background about myself. My name is Mark Unruh. I am an older version of Dominic Sween. I also went to Cal Poly.
More senior.
More senior.
Yeah, not older, senior.
Older version. Went to Cal Poly, went to the Ag Engineering Department. I'm also a registered civil engineer as well as a registered mechanical engineer. Dominic's done an excellent job of showing us kind of the laying the groundwork of how we got here today. I'll give you a little bit more brief update of exactly what's happening today, specifically around the city of Corcoran and what Dominic was alluding to. The water that we started seeing coming into the Corcoran area came from the Tule, still continues to come from the Tule area. As many of you know, the waters earlier this week, I think actually last weekend, I can't remember, it's all blurring together now, but started going over the spillway at Lake Success. The rated channel capacity in the Tule River is 3,200 CFS. Releases last week were upwards of 9,000, 10,000 CFS. Tremendous amount of water coming from the east. That water is pooling against the east side of Corcoran. It's for miles wide, miles long. What we're seeing is if you want to make an immediate relief of the city of Corcoran, you need to cut the levee south of Corcoran on the east side and drain it to the southeast lake. That's where the water's coming. That's where the water's pooling. That's where the cut needs to be made to provide immediate relief to the city of Corcoran.
I can't read these numbers here.
already, there's a bridge just west of the house. It's all going in there. That new southeast lake.
Needs to be opened up. If we're looking at making a, we're looking at making cuts. You need to make more cuts.
And here's my quick question.
Seems like this is the same elevation as this.
The problem, Supervisor,
79?
Well, sir, here's my question. Here's my question to the point, as I believe Super Boone's looking at those numbers. So obviously yesterday was a long day, so it's hard to retain everything. But what I retained coming out of this gentleman's presentation yesterday and showing us this map, when we were having the conversation on why the county is made a wrong decision to order Boswell to take action on 749, was that because that is one of the lowest points, and historically that takes floodwater early on in flood strategy. But we were told yesterday, if I recall correctly, your reasoning for wanting to send water down here to the southeast was because it was higher ground, and that if you didn't flood your higher ground first and you flooded your lower ground first, it was going to be hard, if not impossible, to go ahead and start sending water to that direction. And I'm just not hearing that this morning. I'm hearing that you're saying that you're doing it now because that is the lowest part, and it's confusing me.
Yeah, because yesterday was,
here's what I'm here to say today.
Well, say what you
We're-
said in the
if we're
meeting
trying to move-
yesterday,
if
because
we're-
now we're being transparent and we're in public, and I need you to be accurate.
Here, let me say what I'm going to say. If we got water on the east side of Corcoran against the levee, we cannot move that water through the Thule Canal on the south side of the Corcoran levee. It needs to move into Southeast Lake on the east side.
Because,
Thing is changing every day.
so it's changed from yesterday.
Next week, we're going to have problems in the South Fork.
But okay, so things have changed from your mindset from about 3:15 yesterday to
The
This morning?
9,000 CFS that's been coming down the Thule River takes a little bit of time to get here.
okay. Okay, so I'm right. I'm hearing something different than I heard
Gonna do
yesterday.
Something different every day as the conditions change.
Okay.
So to confirm what Supervisor Valley's saying, if what we discussed yesterday was that we would like to fill the El Rico cell as high as possible to store as much volume as we can in our own areas that are, we'll say, low, but they do have some higher elevations within that area. And you can see in the El Rico, there's a lot of elevation contours going uphill. If we preemptively cut the 749 levee and all the water rushes everywhere else, we're going to lose all the water that we have stored in the El Rico. And that's going to get impacted in terms of its overall total volume that it could store at the end of this whole process.
so.
And
okay,
the southeast area is parallel to that in that if you cut things too early preemptively and we don't follow kind of what we think is the best plan for the total storage within the areas, then we could be losing an opportunity to store another couple 100,000 acre feet on our own lands and surrounding lands that, when it's all said and done, would maybe have prevented another 2 to 3 feet of water up on the Corcoran levee. And that was the main focus of what we talked about yesterday, if that confirms what you.
Okay, thank you, Super Boone.
Yeah, so the Thule runs to it's the 749 levee on one side of 749, and then El Rico levee on the other side, correct? So you have two levees with the Thule going through the middle.
Mhm.
So if you cut 749 going north, how does the El Rico water leave there? Is it blocked from there?
So
or-
the way the hydraulics work is everything is connected as a big pool. So it's the same elevation and it goes up and down together. There's no way to bifurcate the system unless you make great efforts to plug existing holes to retain the water that you've already stored. And that's what we're talking about within the El Rico. Is that if we made if a cut was made yesterday as directed, we would have lost all the water in the El Rico and we may not have been able to get back the water that we had already stored there, which could have impacted us long-term for the flood fight.
But once you fill the 749, then you can fill El Rico back up again, right?
It's possible, but what I'm saying is we're trying to stock water as high as we can in the system within reason to store as much water as we can early because we don't know what this is going to look like long-term, but if we're trying to get to 1.2, 1.3 million acre feet in the areas, we need to be really smart about where we're putting water initially and not just start cutting levees open because people think that that's where it should go. I don't know that there's law that supports where water should or should not go, but we're trying to make the
Well,
best.
I believe there is a law because we're following it right now and everywhere else in the county, and we have to allow the water to stay in the channels of flood zone first. And we want the lower elevation to fill first. And that's a law that we have to follow. So that's why I had to go cut a levee into my friend's field 2 days ago. I didn't like doing it, but that's where the water had to go because it was in a flood zone. So I'm telling this, my consistent story is that we need to keep the water in all flood zones first before we go outside the flood zone. This is all in a flood zone. And so if I use my theory that was told to me, I think by DWR, I would have to fill 749 first and then fill up El Rico. And then I'd leave the 749 West for King River.
And
That's the way I was told.
yeah, and I appreciate that comment. One last comment I'll make before George speaks is if the only thing that matters is the lowest physical spot in the lands, then why do we even have levees? Why do we spend money to raise our levees to protect our lands from being flooded? If somebody else's levee is physically lower than ours, why would we be penalized by being higher on our levee but lower in our lands? And for us, we've spent millions of dollars over many, many years to protect our lands. And we feel that we shouldn't be burdened and penalized by making investments on our property by some notion that just the lowest spot in the land is the controlling element there.
And sir, no one's trying to burden or penalize Boswell Company. By the way, thank you for being here. And sir, you can take the podium. Thank you for being here. We appreciate Boswell being here. There was a call. Everyone in the room wanted some information on your strategy to help with the decision making. 2 days ago during our first special meeting, when people were questioning and asking for information or there was any information from Boswell, I sat here publicly and I asked, is there a representative from Boswell in the audience? Because I wanted you to have the opportunity to speak. So that first time was yesterday and here we are today. So before you present, sir, I just want to ask council. So now that the board took action and this is an agenda item, and I would assume it would be agendized as a presentation, obviously I know the board is going to have an opportunity for questions or comments of anyone who steps to the podium on behalf of Boswell during this time. But will also the audience have an opportunity to take this podium and ask questions as well?
I believe that the board can afford the audience the time to public comment. The thing that I would caution and to make sure these are orderly proceedings is that anybody speaking, making public comment, make comment to the board, that they do not make comments and questions to one another.
The questions go to the chair.
Questions and comments are directed to the board so that we don't have arguments and disputes.
There won't be. We got a gavel. Superbin's not afraid to use it. So we'll keep order.
If it's on your head.
Go ahead, sir. Morning. Good morning.
My name is George Wurtzel. I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer for the Boswell Company. I am not a licensed civil engineer, but I have worked for the Boswell Company almost 36 years and then been involved in all the flood fights since the beginning of my career. And there's a lot of levees in the lake bottom for a reason. And most of the time when we have to take flood water, it does not go to the lowest spot. We make a decision where to put it, where it has the least impact to the Boswell Company and its employees. So a lot of times we're going to the basin first. From those contour maps, the basin doesn't hold any water anymore because the world's changed. We're looking at what I have to live in a world of planning on worst case scenarios. 1.2 million acre feet. I charge these gentlemen, where can we put it to save the town of Corcoran? Whether we flood the 749 now or we flood it later has a big impact on the city of Corcoran. What makes the most sense, we can fill up the south end first, plug the holes, then go to the 749 where we're getting Tule, Kauai, and now Kings River water. We can maximize the amount of water we store in the lake bottom and hopefully protecting the city of Corcoran. If you don't put any water in the southeast, the whole thing starts to fill up, and you make cuts in the southeast, the whole thing has to, you're putting more pressure on the Corcoran levee than it needs to if you can fill to the south of the Tulip first, button it up, then go north. The north central, the south central, all 749, the Loveless, the El Rico, the West Progressive, all that's going to flood. We'll put as much water down in storage as we can. And I hope that's enough to protect the city of Corcoran. We're not maliciously trying to flood our neighbors, but you saw the numbers. Where's 1.2 million acre feet of water going to go? It could be more than that. So in these gentlemen's personal or professional opinion as engineers, the best course of action for us to take is to put water down south, plug the holes, go north. So the Boswell Company's been farming in Corcoran area since 1925, 98 years. And in 98 years, the county supervisors have never gotten involved in telling the Boswell Company or Corcoran where to put floodwater. The county or the supervisors have never, ever come down to poke a hole in a levee. We've always done that on our own. And there isn't anybody that cares more about the community of Corcoran than the Boswell family. Look at all the money they put into it. We have a lot of employees there. We have a lot of infrastructure. We have a lot of inventory. We also have a prison to think about. So I think it is, I believe, the smartest thing for us all to do is to let these gentlemen execute the plan and trying to make a home for 1.2 million acre feet. And hopefully we can save the town of Corcoran.
Thanks, sir. That's all we're trying to do too. And there's people in the room who presented both publicly and in closed session information that, because that's what was available to us, that helped us with our decision making and get to the decision that we made yesterday. So even though it's opposite of what you and your engineers are presenting this morning, I want to point that out because they're in this room and it's people that work hard for us and are working to save Corcoran as well. And talked about the impacts to all of Kings County, especially our neighbors to the north too, which we also care about. But thank you. And I appreciate yesterday that your invite that if we ever needed you or Boswell for information back at the table to help us in our strategy and our decision making as well, all we had to do was just call you, right? So I can just pick up, call you on your cell phone.
Please do. And I apologize not being at the earlier meetings. We honestly didn't know about it.
You didn't know? Okay.
You had mentioned today, we got on a list. We did that this morning.
I apologize. Nobody called you. No one in this room called you. It sounds like, and that you were unaware. A lot of people were aware they've been here, but okay, you
And the
were
difference
unaware.
today between the supervisors in the past is technology. We're available 24/7 at any time of the day, texting, pictures, videos, all the time. That didn't exist, back in, I got my first phone in 87. It didn't exist then. So we're accountable to all 153,000 people in the county here that aren't afraid to call us at any given moment. So we need to work closer together and we got to be transparent. We can't make decisions by ourselves. We have to do it here openly. So you guys probably need to be at the table more often so that we don't affect your business. And like I said yesterday, we went down there with our one excavator, passed all 50 of yours. And, I didn't want to cause a problem that we work together later on. So I appreciate everybody.
We
being here.
presented a case of what we think is best for the community of Corcoran. Again, that's 749. We're going to lose it anyways.
Well, you're doing it today in public and I appreciate that. So
Yeah.
if we can continue on.
Yes, sir. You have anything you want to add, sir?
I just hope that the board strongly considers our recommendation because we do believe it's the best for the community of Corcoran. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Dominic, you have more to go?
No, that was it. And I wanted to shut my computer down if that's okay.
Yes, thank you. That'll be helpful.
Will a copy of this, the materials that you've presented, be provided to the Board of Supervisors to be made part of the record?
Actually, there's actually a new state law that requires that we publish it within 24 hours, so we will need them.
Well, yeah, it's public information aside from the routings and the tolls that I put together. So sounds like that's what we got to do. So,
Okay.
okay.
Thank you. And again, everyone's going to have an opportunity, but first let me go to, you want to go to the board last, Sue, Nez?
Yeah, last.
Okay, we'll go to the board last. At this time, anyone who has questions or comments, please just step to the podium. Good morning, sir.
Morning. Phil Hanson. That was a great presentation, great information. It's hard to compete with all that and with no presentation prepared and no engineers behind me, but the bottom line is we all know we're in a huge flood. That's obvious. Snowpack, we know that. It's obvious, okay? But that southeast lake area right there, that's made up. That's not, there's no such thing. That's something they made up. That area has never been in the lake bottom. It's never flooded before. Our biggest issue is that they premeditated flooding that El Rico area. They knew that it doesn't hold very much water. Our people that we know that are experts that are afraid to be here today for obvious reasons, but they dispute that. They would have never flooded that area. It doesn't hold much water. It's already backing up. So basically, there's no doubt that possibly that area, which is our area and a bunch of other farmers and residences and permanent crops that they named the southeast lake bed. There's no doubt eventually that could have flooded and that would have made room. But the timing and the order of things is not right. It should have gone 749 first. And then that argument about Corcoran is ridiculous because eventually, if the lake was that big, that their new area that they created would have had room before Corcoran, okay? But some people would have had time to protect residences and permanent crops in an area that's never been flooded before. So that area is already breaking on the Tule and on the other side of the El Rico, which was their goal, premeditated. And they kept it pretty hush hush. That was their goal. So it's very obvious to us now what the goal was.
Yes, sir.
I think my brother may want to have a few comments too. I think that.
I just want to just add to a statement you said about other experts and that they're not here today. But I will say publicly, because for full transparency, and I'll only speak for myself, immediately after meeting with Boswell officials yesterday and hearing some of what we heard from me yesterday, I went and I met with another expert and someone who worked the last two floods. And I didn't tell that gentleman what Boswell said. I just asked my questions based on what Boswell just presented to me. And almost every question that I asked, his answer was opposite of what I was told by Boswell. One of them was, should the 749 historically flood first? Should it go first? And his answer was yes.
There's even areas way west of that have even gone before the 749, and those areas have not taken any water yet either.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Eric Hansen, Hansen Ranches. My brother and I and my cousin are partners, and we farm in what they are calling the southeast lake bed. Just to bring everybody up to date, last night there was a breach in the Gates Jones, which is just south of the connection where 10th Avenue and the Tule River reach. And there's, I would say, probably 80 to 100 foot of bank that's gone. That water's rushing in and filling up and is moving towards 6th Avenue. And probably sometime today, 6th Avenue will be covered. And then it'll make its way to 4th Avenue.
Is 6 Dairy on the map?
Yes, Dairy Avenue. 4th Avenue will be next. More than likely, that'll be sometime tonight. The reason why that water moves that fast there is if you look at that map, there's not as much of a contrast in the colors there. Those colors represent the depth of the what they're calling the Southeast Lake. The depth of the 749 is much deeper right there, and so that water would settle there, right? If they would have cut into the 749 as opposed to letting it breach. And so the reality is that by letting the breach happen in the Gates Jones, that water is going to move much faster across land, giving everybody less time to react than it would if it would have gone in 749, which doesn't have the infrastructure that the East Lake has, what they're calling the Southeast Lake. So, oh, thank you. So that breach that I was talking about is right here, about 300 yards from the Tule River. This is what's called the the Gates Jones. This is owned by Hanson and Boswell. I sit on their board. That water is pumped south down to their storage area right here. Historically, they've maintained all of this system and controlled it, as I'm only one person on their board and I don't have any. Over the last few years, it's been clear that they didn't really want to work on this side of this levee here. And that when we came to a flood fight in 2017, they left it to us to try to maintain that. We were successful in maintaining that section of levee. And quite frankly, I'm amazed at how long it lasted with the level of water that they said that they were going to fill up the El Rico, right? Well, the fact is the El Rico doesn't hold that much water because it's really steep right here, right? This is really the only area that holds water. And then pushing it up here makes it go over the top of 10th Avenue right there, which is what happened before the breach. Well, that water poured over the top of 10th Avenue into the Gates Jones. That's never happened before in history. That was forced to happen because they didn't cut the 749. That forced that levee to breach, okay? I just want to also point out that you guys were, Mark Unruh mentioned that we needed to cut the Tule in this region here. And I would like the board to ask them how big of a breach was big enough in here, because it did breach, and I'm not sure what time, but right about here, just west of my house and west of 4th Avenue, that breach is about 30 foot wide as of about right before the start of this meeting. That water is heading this way towards our shop and my cousin Nissa's house. That house has been there for over 80 years. It's probably closer to 90 years. I'm not really sure. This area, again, is never flooded. And our shop right here is going to be impacted probably within hours. So I hope that we're able to get all of our people out. And so just want to throw that out there. That water's going to be shooting across 10th Avenue. Dairy Avenue, then 4th Avenue. And then it's probably going to start pooling here as it gets to this point. And I'm not really sure where that point is, but without a doubt, there's lands in here, pistachio trees along 4th Avenue that were just planted last year. Those will all be impacted. There's no, the only infrastructure there that might hold that water back is CID's line that runs along 4th Avenue. Most likely, many of the structures that weren't hurt over the last 24 hours because of the water levels coming in from this side, where the breaches along the Homeland Canal here have reached over here and filled the CID canal here. And we've been desperately pumping this water uphill, take it as far away from the disaster area as we can before we don't have access to these pumps and facilities. As soon as those get covered up, we're not really sure if we'll be able to take water down this way. Currently, we're taking it 80 to 90 CFS. So we will likely lose access to that capacity at some point as this happens. And by the way, I am on the CID board, and so I wear that hat as well.
So had we to cut 749 yesterday, would that have prevented that levee breach?
It really depends on timing. You know, a lot of this is really late, guys. I mean, that's the emphasis needs to be on much of the problems that we're having with the height of the cross creeks here and the height of the Tule River here is because the breach should have happened before, much before. We wouldn't have a lot of these breaches that are happening on the north end of Corcoran. We might even have been able to save some of the breaches in this area right here had we done that. Now, again, I'm not an engineer, and perhaps that made sense to an engineer, but I would like the board to ask Boswell if they can show us why it was important for them to breach the El Rico first and not the 749.
Okay.
And then also I would like them to prove that by cutting the 749, how that saved Corcoran.
That's a question through the chair, and then, so I'll relay the question right now. But Eric, real quick, you mentioned a lot about roads, and so roadways in and out of Corcoran at this time obviously are very important and critical. Going the strategy of the 749, does that allow more roads to stay open versus flooding where it's currently planned?
Yes, if we would have been able to save the Gates Jones here and the Tule River there, if we would have been able to save that would have left these avenues open longer. And the only answer to that would be 749 would have needed to be cut earlier.
Yes, sir. Because currently, as you know, we both live in Corcoran. It's a mess already as far as people trying to get to work in the morning. Their access is cut off. COs getting to both prisons are having a hard time. Their commute has been rerouted to the north and then through downtown Corcoran. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah. We also own a dairy down in this area right here. We're going to have to reroute our milk and our feed avenues, probably through Utica Avenue and other spots. And you know, at some point, if it gets to the point where it disrupts Avenue 120, then that's another major artery that will be held up. One other point that my brother may not be able to bring up is that there is at the Gates Jones right here. There's 6 gates that can be closed, right? That would limit how much water could come out here. Now, I'm not saying that should happen, but I'm saying that should be part of the discussion, right? And we got water coming in here, and we got water coming in here, right? So we need to know what the plan is.
Okay.
Just a couple more comments. If the 749 was to still could help being cut now, because then we would have time to protect some things and stem that flow for a while. Also, I think they made a point about, I'll paraphrase it. He with the biggest levy wins. Okay, so we supported that Corcoran levy, but that levy is on the other side of the Tule that hurts us. Unless we built our side just as big. Okay, so we didn't have tax dollars to do that. We supported it because of Corcoran. Okay, but let's get real. That levee protected Boswell's pistachios that they planted in their brand new office and Corcoran.
Yes, sir.
We didn't get the benefit of that.
Yes,
We could have built as big a levees as they did if we had tax dollars.
yes, sir. And we played a role in going and getting 5 million of that tax dollars from Department of Corrections to pay for that levy.
It would have been to our benefit to oppose that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So there's a question through the chair for a rep from Boswell. Sir, do you need the question repeated, or you understood the question from Eric Hansen?
I can't remember the question, but I'd like to address some of the comments that have been made about water on the southeast part of.
Okay, and then we'll ask you to address the question.
Yeah, I understand completely what Eric and Philip have said. The immediate problem that we have today is we have a tremendous amount of water and flow on the southeast part of Corcoran. We have the channel, the Tule River, that's got to get it to the west side. There's more water on the east side of Corcoran than get through the west side, than can get to the west side through that channel. What I'm saying is it may be broken now, but you need to concentrate the effort on the east side of Corcoran and divert that water to Southeast Lake, because it's not going to go through the Tule channel to get to the west side.
Question through the chair. Do you mind repeating the question, Eric Hansen?
Yeah, I was wondering if he could tell us how cutting the 749 right now, or yesterday, or 5 days ago, or would have endangered Corcoran.
Sir?
And what I'm saying is, I think it's the same answer, is we have a simple conveyance problem. We have a tremendous amount of water on the east side of Corcoran. We have one channel to get it to the west side of Corcoran. That's why the water level has risen very high on the east side of Corcoran. It can't be pushed through that channel. It has to be diverted to Southeast Lake.
Okay, so,
Upstream of
okay.
of Corcoran.
Yes, sir. So again, a lot the information the board's received publicly the last 2 days and in closed session was action towards a 79 helps to save the city of Corcoran. So the question that I didn't hear a direct answer on is if action is taken today, because if I understand right, for the board's order, the county's equipment is on standby and action to the levy could be taken within 2 hours. So that action, would that action of the 749 put the city of Corcoran and its residents at risk?
By cutting a levee, what I would say is, to be more effective, you need to cut a levee further upstream. What you're trying to say is, of the 100 different options, is this a possible option? Sure, it's a possible option. But what I'm telling you is go further upstream.
Okay.
Have a more effective option.
Okay, but it's an option that doesn't put the city of
Lots of
Corcoran at
options out
risk.
there.
But it doesn't put the city of Corcoran at risk.
No, neither one does.
Okay, thanks, sir.
It's a better option to go upstream.
Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Sir? Okay. We're flowing and I know we're not doing it as smooth as we usually do, but we're trying to let everyone talk. The board jump in at any time. There's no jumping in any time.
George
Sir.
Wurtzel. When the Corcoran levee was elevated in 2017, the highest point of that levee before it was elevated was by the new trees we just planted. The reason why it was elevated for all the way up above Corcoran is because the community of Corcoran was at risk. We moved all of our inventory. Obviously, we're highly motivated to protect our infrastructure, our tomato paste plant, our shop. But it's the community at Corcoran. We have a lot of employees that live there. So it wasn't because of an office. It wasn't because of some trees we planted. So it still is a threat. So you guys need to walk out of this room, 1.2 million acre feet. It could be more. Had this flood event been something substantially less than what we're looking at, we wouldn't have taken the actions we've taken. We need that southeast lake bed and the El Rico to fill the maximum capacity. Again, these gentlemen's professional opinions, we can fill that full first, plug it, go to 749. We think that's the best opportunity and option to keep the water level up against the Corcoran levee at a reasonable level to protect the town of Corcoran.
Okay, thanks,
End
sir.
of story.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, one last comment.
Yes, sir.
March 8th, I got 5 calls from Eric Hansen, looking for a place to move stuff. It's not like we blindsided them. I don't call Philip and Eric and tell them when diesel prices drop. I don't tell them when cotton prices go up. I don't tell them what equipment to buy. We sit in the same boards together. Philip and I sit on the Troy Lake bed. We get all the same information, the meetings. It's not like they got blindsided by this. They knew it was a threat. Hell, even Lois Henry knows it's a threat. So this isn't a mystery. So 1.2 million acre feet. It's not like it's something less.
And we get that, and not being critical, but I can tell you from the feedback from the public over the last 2 days, okay, the general feedback, you can go watch the YouTube videos and online, is that people were believing up north as well that the moves that Boswell was making was causing pressure to the north, or at least causing impacts to other parts of the county. And we just needed to know. So one thing that I learned from being with you yesterday, and was that you're saying you guys are doing a lot of work to save the city of Corcoran, to save the prisons, but you're not communicating with them. You're not communicating with the city manager. You're not communicating with the prisons. And we know that because even on Monday, the prison was in a panic mode and was holding meetings to try to build their own, what they called a super levy. Had they known the actions you're taking, there would be no need to waste those critical time and resources, and also the time and resources that the board has spent here the last 2 days with our staff and the sheriff up in the air, the board's time and the time that we're giving today, which is, I want to point out too, is being respectful to Boswell, because again, the order based on the time of the last 2 meetings was made yesterday, a decision was made, but we're here today hearing you out. We could have said no meeting, to not even have this meeting today, but we moved towards that very quickly yesterday while we were with you yesterday. Let's call the board together. So I hope you at least know that that's a sign of respect to Boswell too.
Richard, I can't get the warden of the prison to call me back.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
I had a couple comments. I forgot to mention, we also farm in the 749. We have 640 acres in there, so I should have mentioned that. We've always known that was at risk of flooding. We're farming that Loveless area, which has, both those areas have flooded, and the big floods, we knew that very well, where we didn't plant permanent crops in those areas. Yeah, the disappointing part also is that, like George said, we're on a lot of boards together. We're on reclamation districts together. We're supposed to be fighting that area on the Gatestones together. Never did it come up that they created this new Southeast Lake, which is our property. That was never, we always knew we're at jeopardy of flooding and a big flood. It's the order it's going that's the problem, and the time. And it's also, we knew that Thule could break on our side, and that was a risk. That's part of why we started moving stuff precautiously, but that's, in my opinion, it was premeditated. They created this lake. They wanted it. They flooded the El Rico first. They knew it wouldn't hold water. They knew it'd break on us, and that's our problem.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else like to approach the podium at this time?
Richard has one last comment.
Yes, sir.
The Boswell Company plugged the Corcoran levee on the Progressive Road. Nobody came down and did that. None of the neighbors did it. We did it. We were highly motivated, obviously, to protect the town of Corcoran.
Yes, sir.
So,
Thank you.
all right, thanks.
Thanks, sir. Morning, sir.
Good morning. My name's Jim Baboon, and I grew up in the lake, so I know all these floods. I've lived there in 1968, 69, 1982, 83. I've seen the way the water flowed. If you cut 749 right now, what it does is buy you time. that water will go out and spread out across the land out there, lower the elevation so that the water can flow more easily from east to west. And we know that this water is eventually going to end up in the lake. Right now, we're not doing a very good job of managing it to keep people that are upstream safe. One of the questions that I have is there's an agreement between the Kings River Water Association and the State Water Resources Control Board, of which Boswell is a signature. And it says that the Kings River is fully appropriated. Well, that fully appropriations agreement, as I understand it, offers more than 1 million acre feet of storage down in the lake. Well, if we're going to actually have storage down in the lake, shouldn't we manage getting the water down there without flooding everybody else between Pine Flat Dam and Tulare Lake? You know, I'm not here to beat up on anybody. I'm just saying that we have agreements in place. Shouldn't we honor them? In 1983, like Philip was saying, the water broke from 749 into their land and washed the hell out of stuff. And they know they're putting themselves at risk, but they're not exposing other people unnecessarily. It just buys time. You have more area to put that land, the water out. It doesn't rise as rapidly. It's the rapid rising water that is going to cause the problems. And do you want me to constrain my comments right now to the lake and the cutting of 749 or
You can say whatever you want, sir. The floor is yours. You can say whatever you want. The floor is yours.
Okay. The other thing, we've lost control. This flood has been not very well managed from day one. We're still thinking like it's a dry year and we got to store this water because the water's so valuable. Well, I remember in 1982, I coined the phrase that nothing changes value faster than water, because in 1980, 81, you couldn't pay enough to get water to put on your crops. In 1983, you couldn't pay somebody to take it. And where we are right now is we're rapidly encroaching on overtopping and hitting spillways at Pine Flat. We think we got problems now. Pine Flat has 2 to 3 times the amount of ability. What's record flows on Pine Flat? Or before Pine Flat on the Kings River, I think it's the record flow was something like 100,000 second feet. Well, you fill up Pine Flat and when inflow equals outflow, you're going to have 100,000 second feet for a period of time coming down. There won't be a dry spot between Pine Flat Dam and Tulare Lake. We need to try and manage to the best of our ability. We've already lost Thule. I don't know if it's at the spillways at Kauai yet, but that'll endanger the city of Visalia and a lot of farmland between down Cross Creek and St. John's in Kings County. But we need to control it and we need to buy time. We need to get that water from the mountains down to Tulare Lake, or if you can take it and deposit it out the North Fork, out to the west side, guys can use it, or it goes out to Mendota and out to the Delta. At least we minimize the flood damage that's going to occur up there. Because if we don't, if we let it overtop, or we have no more control, then all that flood risk, who has that liability? Who wants to assume that damn liability? There will be lives lost. There will be infrastructure, houses, small communities. I mean, we need to manage this water as a flood and start to manage it. And Kings River right now runs right by my house. It's not a capacity. It was 3 feet higher with no flooding downstream from me that I'm aware of that was substantial 2 weeks ago. It's not the highest it's been. It's got capacity. It could hold another 3 feet on top of it right now. So I'm saying another 5,000 to 6,000 second feet could be released from the dam and easily still maintained inside the channels. but we're not doing it. We're not managing. We're just waiting. Well, pretty soon it's going to lose control. Well, now who's in charge? God's in charge. He's always been in charge, but you know, we need to start to think and your actions, in my opinion, to cut 749 right now are warranted simply because it buys the time to be able to deal with the other repercussions that are coming. And if that's not even considering the next storm coming in. This is a record year. And like I said, if the flows traditionally, if the record flow is 100,000 second feet, might be breaking that record. And I'm everything that I'm saying associated with the Kings River is also true with the Tule and Cross Creek or the Kauai rivers. We need to use all the canals and utilize all the canals to move that water down into the lake under control. And who knows, there might even be a farmer that uses a little bit of water like that instead of using his well right now, because those dry canals offer no opportunity to use water. And those canals need to have, in my opinion, during flood years, a minimum and a maximum capacity criteria. You know, I'm not advocating flooding anybody else. I don't care whether it's Boswell Company, Hanson's, Gilkey's. These people are my neighbors, and I'm not advocating, but Tulare Lake is Tulare Lake for a reason, because it was the elevation is where the water went. And we can manage it to the best of our ability, but if you're going to take 1 million acre feet down there, it needs to be started to come and get down there. And you can't fill a bucket from the top down. The bucket's going to fill from the bottom to the top, and it's filled. And we're trying to make politics override physics, and political science has never overcome physical science. These flows coming down the Kings River, if left it uncontrolled and we get, say, 50,000 second feet coming out over the dam, which is very, we're going to have flows that high this year at some point when the snow melt comes, then we put at risk Lemoore Naval Air Station, because you go out there between the North and the South Forks to the west, there is really nothing to stop that water from going out and inundating Lemoore Naval Air Station. I think it's a national security issue. Certainly it's a moral issue. Can we control it and keep and flood the least amount of people and residences and communities? 749 risk of putting more flood pressure on Corcoran. It does not do that. It does the opposite. It buys you time. It lowers the elevation, the total elevation of the water. And when you can spread that water out, you can lower that elevation. It gives you time. And it still may go under. I mean, we don't know how bad it's going to get, but those are the main points that I wanted to make. And like I said, the fully appropriated stream of the Kings River. We're using storage water mentality rather than flood water protection mentality. I'll leave you with that. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for, thank you, Mr. Rubin. Appreciate you. And thanks for bringing up NAS Lemoore. We're going to have the top officials from the base here on the agenda on Tuesday, by the way. They'll be here. Anyone, please feel free to approach. Morning, sir.
Cooper, Corcoran Ranch Manager for J.G. Boswell Company. Also, I have family members in the area that's flooded east of Corcoran, so I'm wearing two hats here. I just wanted to go on record saying, I think a lot of assumptions were made about the Tule River east of Corcoran and upstream on higher elevations that are very inaccurate. Our engineers here can explain how water coming down at super unprecedented high flow rates, 6,000, 9,000 CFS, more than river channels, how what's going on way out west in the lake bottom is causing all those issues upstream. I just want to go on record saying that's not what the talk on our end is about, because that's just not possible. So.
What Gabe's saying is, you can see in the contours, right? The Corcoran area is relatively low compared to the rest of Kings County and Tulare County. So the idea that water being a foot or two higher in our system, kind of in this El Rico 749 area, that has, I would say, no effect on lands that are, say, near Hanford or further upstream that might be 20 or 30 feet higher relative ground elevation to where we are. So changing a little bit of water level down in the Corcoran area doesn't have really any impact on stuff that's upstream out from the historic kind of lake bed region where the contours really dump into that kind of bowl. So I hope that helps with clarifying, but that's maybe some of the confusion with the High Line and the Cross Creek and that those lands are 10 or 15 feet above the water level that's in our area currently. So I just wanted to add that.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else like to speak at this time? Morning, sir.
Good morning. Seen a few of you over the last few days. I just want to second this gentleman's comment about filling a bucket from the top down. You guys have seen, we've already experienced some of the impact on upstream of what this is all causing, and the cost to the county and everything from trying to slow water down from getting to this point. I agree with him. It's buying us time, like filling this first is what needs to happen. And it's gonna, we understand we're in a flood zone. We understand what's happening. But we can't keep slowing this down because we've already had breaks farther upstream, which is causing things to go, having water go places that weren't even prepared for it outside of different areas. So I just want to.
For the record, when you say flooding this first, you're referring to the 749?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, sir.
Thank you.
And for the record, could you give me your name? Thank you.
Anyone else at this time?
I have a question for Dominic.
Sir.
So we're going to get a lot of flood water from King River real soon. If not in 10 days, maybe tomorrow. Spoke with them this morning. They're talking about it right now. They're starting to get serious about it. So can you show me where you're going to start filling up the King River water when it comes in through Stratford? Where would you go first?
So just through, we'll call it just the natural elevations. So the water's going to come in below Empire Weir number 2 near the southwest corner of Stratford. It's going to flow down what we call the South Fork Canal, where it turns in more of a man-made canal that's parallel or, straight north and south. Again, it's just going to continue to flow downhill. So basically everything wants to go to, like we talk about the low point, and it's going to want to flow like we've been talking about to this El Rico, to the Southeast Lake, this area between the Cross Creek and the 749. And it's also going to stack up against the 749 levee. So water is routing in this direction. Whether, man-made or planned levee cuts happen or not, if the water continues to rise, you'll note that basically all the levees in this general area, except the Corcoran levee, are relatively low. So whether we make a man-made cut and put Kings River water to the west or the east or the south or the north, once everything becomes a pool of water together, it's all going to rise, and it's going to inundate basically everything that's in these low-lying areas. So we don't really have a plan for Kings River water per se. It's just you're managing the system water level to a point where it doesn't put the city of Corcoran at risk. And with the present water levels, there's about, call it 9 feet of freeboard on the Corcoran levee to the existing water level. So I'm not an expert on, say, levee safety per se, but usually 2 to 3 feet of freeboard is like your kind of minimum amount that you would want to see. For the city of Corcoran, I think more than that makes sense, but I think it's a stretch to say that 9 feet of freeboard is currently putting the city of Corcoran at risk, but as that level continues to rise, it will make an impact.
Have you made any improvement to the levees out there from the Stratford area to prepare for the water?
Over the years, we conduct surveys to try to improve our levee heights so that we wouldn't get flooded unexpectedly, which you might imagine if you farm in a lake bed and you think you could get flooded, you spend a lot of time and energy and dollars to protect yourself. And I think a question I would present to everybody is, if this was your property and you raised your levee to protect yourself and somebody else came in and told you that your lands need to get flooded just because, how would you feel or how would you take that? And that's kind of, to help with the perspective, that's kind of part of our perspective
Okay.
that I'd like the board to consider today.
Okay.
I'm just trying to measure how you got Thule coming in and you're trying to get it to a higher elevation first. Are you going to do that with the Kings River as well?
North and South Central.
Yeah.
North and
Yeah,
South Central?
so we can pump water and we plan to do this. This is all really high ground on the west side, the north and south central. Those cells did not take on floodwater in the 69 or 83 floods. Those levees are really, really high. In fact, to the south, they're even higher than the Corcoran levee. To give you some perspective, and again, it's because of the contours of the land. The ground gets much steeper and gains an elevation to this kind of southwest corner of the lake bed areas. And we are planning to pump water with our north central pump station. We're gonna pump water into the highest area around and fill this up. And we're gonna continue to pump water or siphon water into the south central. So we're already planning to put up to 100,000 acre feet of flood water, whether from the Kings or from the rest of our system coming from the east. We're already planning on doing that, which is the exact opposite of maybe some of the logic that's been discussed about the lowest areas getting flooded. So I want the board to understand that we're throwing the kitchen sink at this flood, and that's an example of something that's never been done before. Salyer Land Company was the owner of that property back in those days. We now own that property, and that's part of our portfolio of ways to divert floodwaters that otherwise would have flowed to Corcoran from the Kings River. So I hope that helps to.
Yeah, and so now
Picture.
we're going to bring up the John Vidovich name. So are you able to get water on his property as well at this time?
We don't have any arrangements to flood somebody else's land. And that would be included with what I just said. We don't have any discussions about flooding the neighbor's land to the west.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think they have arrangements to flood somebody else's land, and that's us. But a point that they admitted that 749 is going to have to get flooded no matter what. They actually told me it's all that it's going to go. So I can only surmise that the reason they did it in the order they did is to flood us first, so they possibly say there's a miracle and they can save a lot of their farmland. Also, we forgot to bring up that in the 749, they built a brand new levee that across it, which without even any input from my brother, had no knowledge of even why they were doing it, and he's on the board. It's just another part of the secrecy and premeditation that goes on. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Anyone else would like to approach the podium?
Hi, I'm C.L. Howe, Westlake Farms. We farm on the west side of, northwest side of the north central. I'd just like to go on record that the north central, if they flood that, is not flooding, it's being pumped in. So that's controlled. So we have some concerns is, if they raise it up and they could intentionally break it. So we would just hope that the Board of Supervisors would take note that that is a controlled flood. That's not just flood water that's pumped in. We're fully supportive of that to protect lands, but there's also needs to be managed and watched that they don't take it up to a foot of freeboard. So they're breaking something this way versus saving something else. So we're just, these are tough decisions, tough times, but I just want to make a note on the record that that is a pump station where it's controlled. It's not just freely. So they can elevate a water level more so than just what the natural flow does.
And then are you working with Boswell on that at the same time, or
No, we're just aware of
Okay.
what's there. We're very observant. We know what's going on there and stuff like that. And then, another new piece is the Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts also owns 14,000 acres that's right there. And, I think it's important that, they're a landowner, that they participate in Kings County, participate in the flood fight. They're large owners in Reclamation District 761. I know a lot of people point a finger at Mr. Vidovich. Well, they're part of this fight too. So I think they all have to step up and,
I think everybody needs to be at the table to get the water spread out.
yep. So thank you.
It is, we don't want it coming down at one time. So
Just, and thanks, Seal, for saying that. One thing I wanted to mention, it's in parallel to the Tulare Lake Compost Facility in the Sanitation District. Something that hasn't been discussed is, right parallel to the 749 in this area is the Tulare Lake Drainage District. That's an area that has tile drain water from agricultural fields. That area would eventually get flooded by a decision to cut the 749 levee and to raise the water level. There is no natural levee on the northeast corner of the 749. So once that fills to a certain elevation, that's going to overtop the canal there, which would lead to additional landowners and facilities and different agencies potentially seeing floodwaters. So just want to point that out, that it's not as simple as there's the lake bed, that's where it should go. There's a lot to consider here, and there's these cascading effects from decisions that are made. I think you all know that, but there's a lot of moving parts within this entire area that need to be considered.
okay, thank you. George, I'm gonna ask you a question.
Yep.
Well, thank you for being transparent today. I appreciate that. I know we've been at odds for some time over other issues, but at this time, if the board decides to go and put a cut in 749, could we get you to do it so we're not at odds?
Well, if the board decides to put a cut in the 749, I would say that's unprecedented in history. We were planning on doing it anyways. We were just trying to be methodical on how we're going to handle all this water. If a cut's going to be made in our levee, I prefer that we did it in the right place.
Okay.
Putting a cut on the high side doesn't do anybody any good. It's going to be hard to get water into it, and it'll be really hard to get water out of it.
Well, my concern is we make precedent, we do something that's never been done before, and then now we're fighting. I don't want to fight with Boswell. I don't want to fight with Vidovich. I don't want to fight with Seal Hal Jr. I don't want to fight with anybody. We have a big decision to make here that affects a lot of people. And I just don't want to, if we do decide to go that way, we're going to talk in closed session. I would like your participation in the cutting of the levee if we go that direction.
So I just want to go on record, when we put water in the north central and south central, it is not to hurt Seal Howe. It is not to hurt Sanitation District, who we have a very good working relationship with. We're just trying to find places to put over 1 million acre feet of water, and we're going to give up farm ground to do
Well, I
it.
think he stated that it was welcome. It's a manageable flood. So,
We're not planning on trying to flood our neighbors to the west of us. That
no,
doesn't do us any good.
we got to use all the ground we can. So it's important. And that's why I'm kind of at odds with the Kings River, because we should have already started this process gradually getting water up there to relieve the pressure later on.
Yeah, there's 2,700 second feet coming down the South Fork. Pumping water in north central is part of the solution. The rest of it's going to start going in the 749.
Right.
So,
It'd be easier to do it slowly than all at one time. That's my point. I think we could have been doing it the last couple of weeks.
well, this is part of the equation while we're trying to go down south. We got a mass of water coming off the Kings that hasn't even come to a shed.
Right.
You got to put these colors of water in buckets, and we're trying to manage it the best we can and keep the water level off the Corcoran levee at hopefully less than 2 feet of freeboard.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
thanks.
Anyone else like to say anything at this time before the board goes to closed session? Yes, sir.
Gabe, again, I'd just like to go on record saying that, this is an unprecedented weather situation, unprecedented flows and releases from the dams. And I think there's been some accusations thrown out that I don't agree with. What's happening on the east side of Corcoran is unprecedented flows coming from the dams, both Kauai and Success. I'd just like to state that that's causing the flooding. I've heard them name the Boswell company causing that flooding. It just doesn't mathematically work out with flows in our opinion, and just wanted to state that for the record.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything from the Board of Supervisors at this time? Go, Ms. Verboen.
As I'm speaking here right now, Pine Flat Dam is filling up. At some point, every minute right now, we're increasing our flood risk that's going to happen sometime in the near future. At a minimum, right now, without having, inflow into Pine Flat should equal outflow right now, because we can handle it. Wait till it fills up and we're not going to be able to handle it. And you think we got problems now, it could be exponentially worse. And the canals need to have their capacity need to be obtained so that they don't overtop the canals, but at the same time, they should be flowing water down under control down to the lake, and the lake people can figure out where they want to put it first, because they know it's going to be full, and the higher that you make the levees and the higher that you stack that water, the more damage occurs when it breaks. And so with that, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Yes, sir.
I just want to make it real clear. I support Jim Verboen's comments on the reservoirs. We have been trying since January to get all the reservoirs in what they call top of conservation. They've all been above it, and that's controlled by the Corps of Engineers. The Boswell company does not control the reservoirs. We can try and influence the Corps, and it's typically we're the ones asking them to release water. But I just want to make sure that everybody knows we don't run the reservoirs. We're not asking anybody to hold any water back. They should have been releasing water in January. And that's the point I hope the board takes up with the Corps of Engineers when we go back and look in the rearview mirror, things that could have been done differently. They targeted 300 second feet out the North Fork for 2 months when people are running wells. A lot of this could have lessened the impact on Corcoran. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Hill, you have anything you want to add? Did you want to say something, sir? No? Mr. Hill, you have anything you want to add at this time?
No, I don't. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Okay. Then I guess we'll adjourn this meeting and the board will take up the matter in closed session. Thank you again for everyone for coming. Thank you.
Yeah, I think so.
Curious text me, is that your?
Yeah. Closed session.
We have in the past.
No relation to me. But that's cousin.
Well, that's fine.
Shut everything down.
Thank you, Mark.
How we were saying those down. Things have changed, but that's kind of higher.
Yeah, because we'll have 2 minutes. They'll probably want to look at maps and everything. So if he can switch me over again. And, okay. Cool. Understand. So, and, I guess I'm curious, but I'm going to tell you. So there's things in, I don't know where it's staying in here so that we can use the monitors and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Not only do we have to